I grew up in a small town in the foothills of western North Carolina, not far from where the Blue Ridge Mountains start to twist into the rest of the Appalachians. Around there, everyone either hunts, hikes, or works with their hands. The forest is just part of life, a constant backdrop that you stop really thinking about until you have to spend a night in it. When I was 22, I was working for a small construction outfit based out of Marion. The boss, Rick, was a gruff guy in his 40s, built like he'd been lifting lumber since birth. There were only 3 of us full-time, me, Rick, and Dale, who was a few years older than me, and always joked too much for how quiet he could get when he was thinking. That summer, we landed a contract to build a small hunting cabin for a retired guy who owned a few acres up near Grandfather Mountain. The place was isolated. You had to drive down a narrow gravel road for 10 miles, then hike in another 1.5 miles with gear. The owner wanted something off-grid, which meant no power, no plumbing, and no cell signal. Rick decided it'd be faster if we camped on site and worked through the week instead of driving in every day. I didn't argue. I grew up camping and liked the idea of a week in the woods. We got there on a hot Tuesday afternoon. The air felt heavy and damp, full of pine and earth. The tree canopy was so thick it dimmed everything beneath it, like a natural filter. We set up camp on a flat stretch of ground near a small creek. By sunset, the sound of water trickling over rocks blended with the low hum of insects. That first night was peaceful. We grilled some sausages over the fire, had a few beers, and turned in early. You could hear coyotes yipping far away, but that was nothing unusual. The next few days went smooth. We cleared brush, poured the foundation, started framing. The days were long and hot, and we'd be covered in sweat and sawdust by evening. Every night we sat around the fire, telling dumb stories. It was one of those stretches of time where you don't check your phone, don't care about the world. You just work, eat, and sleep until the 4th night. I woke up sometime after 2 in the morning because I heard movement outside my tent. Not a quick scurry like a raccoon. This was deliberate, heavy. I could hear leaves crunching softly like someone walking barefoot. At first, I thought it was Rick or Dale. I whispered, "Rick." No answer. The footsteps stopped right beside my tent. I could hear breathing, slow, controlled. I froze. I could see the faint outline of a shadow through the tent wall, but it wasn't clear enough to tell what it was. Just tall. I waited, not daring to move. After maybe 10 seconds, the shadow shifted and the footsteps started again, moving past my tent and into the woods. I unzipped the tent just an inch, enough to peek out. The campfire was almost out, just glowing coals now. For a second, I thought I saw something tall moving between the trees, but it was gone too fast to tell if it was a trick of the light or something real. The next morning, I told the others. Dale laughed and said I probably dreamed it. Rick just frowned and said maybe it was a bear, though he didn't sound convinced. That day, I noticed the woods were quieter than before. Not silent, but thinner. The birds didn't start up until later, and even then it felt like they were keeping their distance. That night, I didn't sleep well. I lay awake, listening. Sometime after midnight, I heard Dale whisper from his tent, "You hearing that?" Before I could answer, the footsteps came again. This time, closer. They stopped near the fire pit. Then came a voice, soft but clear, from just beyond the circle of light. "Dale, come here." It was my voice. At first I thought I'd imagined it, but Dale whispered, "That sounded like you." My heart was pounding. I sat up, straining to hear. "Dale." The same voice again, only slower this time. "Come here. I found something." That was word for word what I'd said earlier that day, when I found an old saw blade half buried near the creek. The tone was identical. The same casual rhythm, like it had recorded me. Rick's tent unzipped suddenly, and he stumbled out, flashlight in hand. "What the hell's going on?" The voice came again, now from deeper in the woods. "Rick, come here." Rick froze. "Who's out there?" he shouted. Nothing answered. The beam from his flashlight cut through the trees, and for half a second, I saw what looked like two eyes reflecting back, high up, higher than a person's. They blinked out. Rick cursed and threw a log on the fire, stoking it back to life. We sat there the rest of the night, jumpy and exhausted, listening to every sound the forest made. The next morning, none of us spoke much. Rick said we were finishing up that day and hiking out before nightfall. We worked fast, barely talking, just wanting to get done. By afternoon, the sky started clouding over. I remember the air feeling strange, too still, too humid, like the calm before a storm that never came. We packed up the gear and started the hike down. The forest felt different, heavier somehow. Every few minutes I thought I heard someone behind us, matching our footsteps. Whenever I stopped, it stopped. About halfway down the mountain, we came across something that made all three of us stop cold. A deer lay across the trail, except it didn't look right. Its body was twisted, almost folded in half, like its spine had been snapped. There was no blood, no torn flesh, nothing. Just wrong. Rick muttered, "Let's move." We kept walking, faster now. I could feel something watching us, not like paranoia. It was physical, like heat on the back of my neck. We reached the trucks just as the sun started setting. As we loaded the last of the tools, Dale stopped and pointed toward the ridge behind us. There was a figure standing there, maybe 100 yards away. Tall, thin, unmoving. For a second I thought it might have been a tree stump, but then it tilted its head, slow, unnatural, like the motion didn't belong to a human body. We all froze. And then, clear as day, it spoke. "Dale, come here." Same tone, same rhythm, only warped now, stretched out like it had learned the shape of my words but not their meaning. Rick shouted, "Get in the truck." And we did. He floored it, gravel spitting from the tires as we tore down the road. Nobody spoke on the drive back. Dale kept glancing out the back window like he expected to see something chasing us. We reached town around midnight. I went straight home, showered, and sat in the dark for a long time, trying to convince myself it was some kind of prank. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The next morning, I went by Rick's office for my pay. Dale's truck was already there, but when I walked in, Rick looked rattled. He said Dale hadn't shown up yet. He told me he'd gone back early to the site, said he couldn't shake the feeling we'd left something behind. When he got there, one of the tents was back up. Mine. He swore he'd watched me pack it the day before, but there it was, pitched exactly where it had been before. Inside, he found footprints pressed into the dirt. Bare, human-shaped, but the toes were too long, and the heel marks were too deep, like whatever made them weighed twice as much as a man. That was the last time I saw Rick. He quit not long after, said he was moving to Arizona to be near his brother. As for Dale, he disappeared a week later. His girlfriend said he'd gone hiking by himself one morning and never came back. Search and rescue teams combed the woods for days, but they didn't find a trace. A few nights after he went missing, I woke up around 3 a.m. to something tapping on my bedroom window. It was a steady, rhythmic sound. Tap, tap, tap. I sat up, heart racing. My room was on the second floor. Then I heard it, my own voice, whispering, "Come here." I didn't move. I just listened as it repeated the words, softer and softer until it stopped completely. When the sun came up, I checked outside. There were faint prints in the mud under the window, bare and long, with the toes spread like hands. I moved out of that house 2 months later. I've never been back up the mountain, and I don't go camping anymore. Sometimes, when I'm driving at night through those back roads and the radio cuts to static, I swear I can hear my own voice under the noise, calling my name, like it never stopped learning how to sound like me. Come here. I grew up in a quiet corner of southern West Virginia, the kind of town that doesn't show up on most maps. My family's land backed up to part of the Monongahela National Forest, miles and miles of deep rolling woods with steep hollers and creeks that ran all year round. When I was younger, those woods were like a second home. I hunted, fished, camped. Everyone in town did. The forest wasn't scary to me then. It was just part of life. But I learned quick that it can change on you, especially when you start seeing it in the dark. This happened about 7 years ago. I was 28, recently divorced, and trying to get my head straight. My uncle had a small cabin near the Greenbrier River that hadn't been used in years, and he told me I could stay there a while if I wanted some peace and quiet. I thought a week alone out there would do me good. The cabin was simple: 1 room, a wood stove, an old cot, and a deck that looked out over the river bend. You had to park at the end of a dirt path and hike about a 1/4 mile to get to it. The first couple days were peaceful. I fished, chopped some wood, and read by lantern light. The only thing that bothered me was how quiet the woods felt. I grew up around those sounds: owls, frogs, night bugs. But here they barely made a peep after sundown. You'd hear one owl maybe, and then silence, like something else was listening. The first weird thing happened on the 3rd night. It was close to midnight, and I was sitting on the deck smoking. The moon was out, and the river had that dull silver shine. I could hear the water moving over rocks, slow and steady. Then I heard crying. It was faint, a woman's voice, or at least it sounded like that. She was down near the water. At first I thought maybe somebody was camping downstream, but the crying didn't move. It just stayed in the same spot, soft and broken, like someone trying not to be heard. I called out, "You okay down there?" The crying stopped. I stood and grabbed my flashlight, aimed it toward the riverbank. Nothing. Just rippling water and trees. I listened for another minute, then went back inside. The next morning I checked the shoreline. No footprints, no signs anyone had been there. The ground was damp, so I would have seen something if there had been. That night the crying came again. Same time, same place. I didn't call out that time. I just sat and listened. The sound came and went in short bursts, like whoever it was catching their breath. Sometimes it even sounded closer, like they were moving just out of sight along the river. Around 1 a.m., the crying stopped, replaced by a long, drawn-out sound that I can only describe as a moan. It was low and deep, and it echoed across the water in a way that didn't sound right, like it wasn't traveling naturally. I went inside, locked the door, and kept the lantern on until dawn. By the next day, I'd convinced myself it was some kind of animal. Maybe a fox. They can sound like screaming sometimes. But something about the tone of it, the way it carried, felt wrong. I almost left that day. I probably should have. That evening, a storm rolled in. The wind whipped through the trees, and rain came down hard for hours. The sound of it hitting the roof drowned out everything else, and I actually felt better, like the storm had pushed whatever that was away. Sometime around 3 in the morning, I woke up to a thumping sound on the porch. At first, I figured it was a branch or debris from the storm. But then came another, heavier. 2 steps, then 2 more. Slow, deliberate. I froze. The lantern by my cot was still burning low, just enough to see shadows moving against the cabin walls. Something was out there. Then came a knock. Not frantic, not loud, just 3 slow knocks on the door. I didn't move. I held my breath and waited, every hair on my arm standing up. Then, from the other side of the door, came a voice. It was a woman's voice, quiet and shaky, like someone crying. "Please, let me in." It didn't sound like anyone I knew, but it was close. Too close, like it was trying to sound familiar. I said, "Who's out there?" The voice didn't answer right away. Then it came again, softer this time. "Please, I'm cold." I reached for my rifle, which was leaning by the wall, and aimed it at the door. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely hold it steady. The voice spoke again, but it didn't sound right anymore. The words started to stretch, like whoever was saying them didn't know how they were supposed to sound. "Please." That's when I realized there weren't any footsteps anymore, just silence. I waited, heart hammering in my chest. After what felt like forever, I heard the crying again. But this time, it was right by the window. I turned the lantern toward it, and for a split second, I saw something pressed against the glass. Pale, wrong. The face didn't look real. The skin looked stretched, like it didn't quite fit the shape underneath. The eyes were dark, but they weren't reflecting the light. They were just absorbing it. Then it was gone. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. When the sun came up, I went outside. There were muddy prints on the porch, barefoot, human-sized, but not right. The toes were too long and the stride too wide. They led down toward the river and disappeared at the water's edge. That afternoon, I hiked up to the nearest neighbor's cabin about a mile away. An older man named Caleb lived there most of the year. When I told him what had happened, he didn't look surprised, just tired. He said, "You've been hearing the crying, huh?" I asked if he'd heard it too. He nodded. "Comes around every so often. Folks around here call it the crying thing. Sometimes it sounds like a woman. Sometimes like someone you know. I heard my brother's voice once, and he's been dead 20 years. I asked what it was, and he just said, "Ain't something you can name. Best you can do is don't answer it. Don't look at it too long. And don't follow the sound." I told him I was packing up and leaving that night. He nodded again. That'd be smart. When I got back to my cabin, the woods were already dimming. The air felt heavy and still, like before another storm. I started loading up my gear, but before I finished, I noticed something strange. Wet footprints leading up the deck steps. They weren't there when I'd left that morning. I backed inside, shut the door, and pulled the curtains tight. Just after sunset, the crying started again. This time it was louder, closer, right down by the riverbank. It went on for maybe 10 minutes before turning into that same awful moaning. Then came the knock on the door, 3 slow knocks. "Please, let me in." The voice was different now, deeper, like a man trying to sound like a woman. I could hear it moving around the cabin, circling slowly. I sat there, gun ready, trying not to make a sound. At one point, it stopped outside the back wall and whispered, "I can see you." The words were wrong, stretched, distorted. Then I heard something scratching along the wall, moving toward the window. I raised the rifle, and before I could do anything, the window shattered inward. The lantern flickered out. The only light was from the lightning flashing outside. For a moment, in that flash, I saw it. Standing just inside the broken window frame. It was tall, maybe 6.5 feet. The shape was human but off. The limbs too long. The skin pale and slick like something that hadn't dried right. The mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. I fired once, and the flash blinded me. When my vision cleared, it was gone. The crying started again outside, moving away toward the river. I didn't wait. I grabbed what I could, ran through the rain, and didn't stop until I reached my truck. I drove all the way back to town without looking in the mirrors once. When I got there, I called my uncle and told him what happened. He said nobody had been up to that cabin in years because something had scared off a couple of hunters back in the late 90s. They'd claimed to see a woman by the river crying, but when they tried to help her, she ran into the woods on all fours. I don't know what I saw that night. Maybe it was a trick of the storm, or my mind breaking down after too many nights alone. But I can still hear it sometimes, late at night, especially when it rains. I was born and raised in eastern Kentucky, in a coal town that's mostly gone now. Half the houses are empty, and the mine shut down 20 years ago. Back when I was a kid, though, everyone worked there. My dad, my uncles, even me, for a few years before I joined the county road crew. Our job was simple: maintain the back roads that wound through the mountains. There are places out here where you can drive 20 minutes without seeing another person. Deep hollers, one-lane roads, and woods so thick the light turns green by noon. What I'm about to tell you happened in 2003. I was 35 then, and my partner on the crew was a guy named Mike. He was from Hazard. Tough, quiet, the kind of man who didn't scare easy. We'd been working together about a year when the county sent us out to clear a stretch of old service road that connected to an abandoned mining site. The locals called it Hollow Road, though it didn't show up on any map. It ran maybe 5 miles into the hills before dead-ending at an old quarry. No one had been out there in years, not since the company packed up and left. We left early, just after sunrise, with a chainsaw, some gas, and a county truck. The road was in bad shape, overgrown, full of washouts. We figured we'd be done by mid-afternoon. About halfway in, we came across a deer standing in the middle of the road. It wasn't moving, just standing there, staring at us. Its fur was patchy, and one of its legs looked twisted. Mike honked the horn, but it didn't flinch. When we got closer, it turned its head real slow and looked straight at me. Its eyes weren't right. They weren't reflecting the sunlight, just dull and flat, like marbles. Mike leaned out the window and said, "You ever seen one look like that?" Before I could answer, the deer bolted into the woods, fast and silent. Not a twig snapped. We shrugged it off and kept going. By late morning, we'd cleared about 3 miles. The road ended at a steep drop-off where an old wooden bridge used to cross a creek. The bridge was long gone. Nothing left but 2 rotting posts sticking out of the ground. We parked and got out to stretch. That's when I noticed how quiet it was. Not just peaceful quiet, empty quiet. No birds, no bugs, not even the wind through the trees. Mike was standing by the edge, looking down at the creek bed below. "You smell that?" he asked. I did. It was a sour, metallic smell, like blood or wet iron. It seemed to be coming from farther down the hollow. I told him we should probably head back and mark it for cleanup later. But he wanted to check it out. Said he'd heard stories about people dumping deer carcasses in old mine shafts and figured that's what it was. We started following the smell downhill through the brush. It led us along what might have once been a game trail, winding through thick rhododendrons until we came to a small clearing. That's where we saw it. In the middle of the clearing was a pile of bones, animal bones, I think, stacked up in a spiral. Not random, but arranged. There were tufts of fur caught between them, and in the center sat what looked like part of a deer skull, polished clean. Mike cursed under his breath. "What kind of sick bastard does this?" Before I could answer, we both heard movement, branches snapping somewhere behind us. We turned, expecting maybe a bear, but what came out of the trees wasn't an animal. It was standing upright, tall and thin. The body was shaped like a man, but the proportions were off. The arms too long, the neck too narrow. The skin was the same gray color as the bark around it, almost blending in. For a few seconds it didn't move. It just stood there, head tilted slightly, watching us. Mike raised his saw, not running it, just holding it like a weapon. "Hey, you lost!" he shouted. The thing moved its head a little. Then, in a strange, jerky way, it said, "Hey!" It was Mike's voice. Perfectly. He froze. I could see the color drain from his face. The thing took a step forward and its movements were wrong. Too smooth, like it wasn't walking but gliding over the ground. Then it said again, "Hey!" But this time it came out warped, drawn out, like it was struggling to keep the sound right. That's when Mike yanked the starter cord on the chainsaw. The roar broke the silence, and the thing flinched, almost like it wasn't expecting noise. Then it turned and disappeared into the brush so fast it barely made a sound. We stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just breathing hard. Then Mike killed the saw and said, "We're leaving." We practically ran back to the truck. The forest stayed quiet the whole way. Once we got in, I realized how bad my hands were shaking. Mike didn't say a word, just kept staring straight ahead as we bounced down the road. When we were about a mile from the main highway, he slammed on the brakes. Standing in the middle of the road ahead of us was the same deer we'd seen that morning. Only now it was standing upright. Not fully, but hunched, balancing awkwardly on its back legs. Its head hung low, like it was too heavy for its neck. It took a step toward us. Mike gunned the engine, and the thing dropped to all fours and bolted into the woods again. We didn't stop driving until we were back in town. We told the county supervisor what we'd seen, left out the talking part because we didn't want to sound crazy. And he said he'd send a wildlife team out there. But when they went up a week later, they said the road was clear. No bones, no smell, nothing. Mike quit the road crew not long after that. Said he was moving to Ohio to work with his brother-in-law. I didn't see him again for years. Fast forward to 2015. I got a call from his sister. She said Mike had gone missing on a hunting trip up near the Red River Gorge. They found his truck parked off a service road, keys still in the ignition. They searched for 6 days. The only thing they found was his rifle, propped against a tree. I didn't say anything then, but I knew where he'd gone. A few months later, I decided to drive back up Hollow Road myself. I don't know why. Maybe guilt, maybe curiosity. The road had grown over again, but I managed to get a mile or so in before the truck couldn't go farther. I walked the rest of the way. The woods were just like before, too quiet. No wind, no life. When I reached the old bridge site, the smell was there again, that same sour metallic scent. And then I heard it. "Hey." It was faint at first, echoing through the hollow. "Hey." The same tone, the same voice. Mike's voice. I froze. My whole body went cold. It came again, closer this time. "Hey, you lost?" The exact words he'd said that day. I turned and saw movement at the tree line. Something tall, gray, moving between the trunks. Its shape shifted as it walked, like it couldn't decide what it was supposed to look like. Then I heard another voice, this one my own. "Let's go." I don't remember running, but I must have. Because the next thing I knew, I was back in my truck, hands bleeding from where I'd scraped them on something. I drove home and haven't gone near that area since. Sometimes, though, especially when it rains and the power cuts out, I think about that hollow, about the bones, the smell, and the way that thing tried to talk like us. I can still hear it if I think hard enough. That flat, hollow tone dragging my voice through the dark. "Hey,